And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a fantastic session. I know a lot of those were very engaging. I think one of them had some technical difficulties, but I got to pop into the rest of them, and everybody seemed like they were actually putting their hands into the dirt and doing some work. So there were a couple of questions during the last session that I think this particular panel will be primed to answer, and that's when we're talking about workforce development and how computer science plays into that. I'm going to give an introduction of our panelists here, and then I'm going to hand it off to Trice Johnson. She's going to be the moderator for this panel and ask the questions and keep the panel going. So for starters, let me see, I don't know if your screen looks the same way mine does, so I'm going to start from top left. We'll start with LaRon. LaRon Walker is a technology entrepreneur who graduated summa cum laude from Tennessee State University with a bachelor's degree in electrical and computer engineering. Later, he enrolled in Purdue University, where he obtained his master's of science in the same area. As an authority in web technologies, LaRon has been instrumental in architecting leading enterprises platforms that span both web and mobile for over 20 years. He's the CEO of Mantis EDU, and an education technology company that works to expose students to applied technologies in engaging ways. Hopefully you all caught his session yesterday. I heard it started off a little rocky, but then picked up, and I've known LaRon for about a year and a half now, and his stuff is rock solid. So next, let me look at my order. Stacey, all right. Stacey Rivers is Director of Tech Human Capital Management for the Global Technology and Operations Division at Warner Media, formerly Turner Broadcasting. With expertise in developing strategies to close skill gaps and building talent pipelines, she is also mom, author, and an avid blogger. Stacey is also a graduate researcher from Mercer's STEM Education Innovation Lab. Her research interests are STEM education and underserved youth perceptions of STEM skills, including massive open online courses and academia and industry collaborations. Rivers earned a master's in science and management, specializing in leadership and organizational effectiveness from Troy University, and a Bachelor of Science in Technology Management from Clayton State University. With a passion for sharing her knowledge and giving back, Stacey currently serves on the board of Hero for Children, the Consumer Technology Association, Future Workforce Council, and the Georgia Department of Education Computer Science Advisory Committee. Thank you very much, Stacey, for helping us out with that. Now, Jordan. Jordan is Director of Community Outreach for Carnegie Mellon University's Create Lab. If you haven't seen Create Lab, Google it, check it out. It's pretty interesting. And also leads their satellite network. He earned his doctorate in instructional technology with an emphasis on creative applications of learning technologies and critical and aesthetic pedagogy. He has designed courses ranging from the history of hip hop to creative pedagogy through technology, as well as contributing learning materials to national organizations such as Rock and Roll Forever. Jordan's education projects leverage art as a means of raising the voices of community members to address local needs. His current work emphasizes the creative reimagining of teacher professional learning in order to best build habits around curiosity, empathy, reflection, and equity. Jordan has presented at various national conferences, including South by Southwest EDU, New Media Consortium, and Connected Learning and the ATMI. Thank you all for joining us. I'm now going to pass it off to Trice and get out of you guys' way and let you talk about how we can save the world.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you. I mean, even in this season, right, we're all very aware of all that everyone is enduring in this season. And we come today 100% to help everyone understand kind of really some of the great work that's going on in workforce readiness and preparedness for 21st century digital worker of the future. My name is Trice, as Bryan stated, and I work at, I lead a team at Microsoft focused on data and AI. And so my world has really been around, LaRon and I have been partnering along the journey for a very long time. My space is IoT, data, AI, mixed reality, you name it, it's all things emerging. And Microsoft, really focuses, if you think about all the flagship schools, new cutting edge schools that they're leading, all the work that we do with our programs internally for youth, and then really partnering across education ecosystems to bring to bear really what the 21st century worker engagement, what that model looks like. So I'm so excited about this panel. LaRon, Stacey, Jordan, we're going to have really great conversation today. I think to help everyone to get grounded and settled in not only the great work you're doing in each of your respective areas, but we've had some amazing conversation about how to bring together private and public sector together, converged in partnerships. And we're seeing it happen to where we're walking together as one. And I'm so excited that all three of you are here to help everyone really get immersed in this next level of space that we're all going to be taking. And so we're getting ready to kick this conversation off. I hope you're just as excited as I am. I think I see it. I feel it. Yes?
Yes. Absolutely.
Ready.
Of course.
Absolutely. Let's get started. And so I'm going to kick it off first, LaRon, with the conversations you and I have had, the work that you've been doing with Mantis EDU, focused on bringing innovations to market in the education space. And when we think about the Internet of Things, we think about machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is a space we are so passionate about because we see the transformations that need to happen for educators and how to get them level set, right, with the type of new model learning and new model delivery that needs to happen in order to help these students get to a level where they can really embrace these new emerging technologies. Talk to us about what your company is doing for workplace preparedness and really a lot of the great work that you're already doing, partnering with the education ecosystem, really all across Georgia and all around the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll tell my story. My bio typically starts from, Tennessee State, but a lot of people may not know, and I'll mention it for the sake of this call. I'm actually an Atlanta native. And I often go back to my initial experience here in Atlanta when I was in middle school, and we had magnet high schools back then, and you had to fill this form out to determine what your major would be. And so I attended Frederick Douglass High School in Atlanta Public Schools, which was a leading engineering magnet school. And on the form, there was a question that said, do you want to pick electrical or mechanical engineering? I knew no difference between the two. And I chose electrical primarily because I like to play with wires. And that was my decision on what made me make that happen. I left Frederick Douglass and went to Tennessee State, where I had a hands-on dean. And that's why I got introduced to building code and, making HTML and things along those lines. And then later at Purdue, I was in a research lab. All of those experiences were really informed by my ability to get exposed, to touch, to create, and to experience technology. And after that experience, I realized, I'm looking back at the current education system, in most cases, students are not exposed to hands-on learning. And oftentimes you look at the experiences that happen within classrooms, most of those real experiences are afforded to people who have a lot of means, and who also have the people who actually, the educators or the affluent people who can actually come back and forth in those communities. So given that kind of disparity, one of the things that we started to realize is that kids are excited to learn. And the philosophy that we have within Mantis EDU is that if you could expose kids to kind of how things work, they would get excited about why things work. And so being able to create solutions that are anchored in things that happen in the real world, allowing for students to experience those things in real time, and then making those things accessible, open, and affordable, and making the solution turnkey so that teachers can kind of get embraced, but it's kind of our focus. So we take very, very complicated things that are used in the real world, the Internet of Things, devices, connected devices, you name it, artificial intelligence, and we bring those into a K-12 classroom. And we let kids get exposed to those things in ways they understand. So whether you're an elementary kid who may not understand these things, but you're at home talking to Google Home or Alexa, we help you understand that you can actually create and build these things and become producers of this technology versus always being a consumer. And then helping them also realize that in these very technical and complicated fields, there are different pathways there. So you're not always a person behind the black screen writing code. They're creatives. They're people who test code, that build code, that sell code, and helping them understand all these different experiences while also exposing them to people that they can understand and see, role models and industry connections. And so doing this turnkey kind of conversation that bridges the entire ecosystem that motivates kids to really play in these spaces and realize they can participate in it at scale.
I love that, LaRon, and why this is so important is when you talk about technology is one thing, but being able to creatively think, being able to innovate, and being able to solve really complex problems, leveraging all of these new capabilities is really the big bet, right? That it's not just about coding, like you stated. It is so much more. And so being able to uplift professional development in a way that educators now can bring the full breadth of not only leveraging technology in classrooms for themselves, but also to help our next generation of leaders to become deep thinkers in this space. You know, this is what Jordan has been focused on, Jordan, and the work that you're doing as a champion across the education professional development community and reimagining this space for teachers and for educators, professional learning in a way that brings about equity and solves that gap, not only through technology, but through very creative strategies. I'd love for you to come and kind of share with us the really great work you're doing and how important it is, as LaRon stated, some of the cognitive capability and the humanization, a lot of things that we need to bring to bear in order to make technology very sticky for these students and for the educators.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. You know, I think that it's been a really interesting time. I started in this work years ago when I was doing a master's program, and I was charged with teaching a class of educators on how to use technology. And I mean, I have a lot of stories about that, but I think the overarching theme was that it was a train wreck. Because I walked in, I pretended like I knew. I had never been in a classroom, right? I knew technology, but I had never been inside of a classroom. And so I walked in presuming all sorts of knowledge, presuming how they should do it, right? And so like at the time I was like hot-shotting it, like, oh yeah, check this thing out. And it wasn't until afterwards where I sort of took a moment to step back and realize how little respect I had given to the expertise that they walked into the room with, right? And I think, you know, that experience, I was probably close to 12 years ago, and I've never forgot the feeling that I had after that, where I realized how often that happens every day in classrooms across the country, in spaces across the country for learners to walk into a space and to feel like their expertise, their experiences, their personhood is being forgotten, and that it's being protected at the door. And so I really came to be infatuated with this idea of authenticity inside of our teaching and learning spaces, acknowledging who we are as whole people, and how do we try to meet each person in that space. And so I was listening to LaRon talk, and I was just, you know, I have my Mr. Rogers, like, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I have like my Mr. Rogers, like, sort of shrine all around me here. But I got like the "You Are Special" banner over here. And I love that there's like this one story where Mr. Rogers he goes back where he invited a sculptor in to teach young learners. But instead of teaching them exactly how to sculpt, he just told the instructor, love the clay. Just love the clay in front of them, right? And I think I hear so much of that in what Mr. Walker is talking about this idea that, like, just engage someone in their passion, right? Just if you can show that you love something, someone else will know that loving that thing is also okay, right? And so if we can bring this sense of like genuine wonder and genuine curiosity into these spaces, that means so much more than knowing that what an Oxford comma, how to use it all the time, right? Like, I think so much of what traditional education has done is emphasize content, right? And emphasize ideas and memorization and replication. And we've done so little around how to help one another be people and be whole people. And so that notion of like coming in and just tinker with some wires in front of students and let them know that like that's a good thing, right? Just you don't have to necessarily go home and be able to build a time machine with it, right? But it'd be great if they just knew that there was a space for them as individuals to be curious about the things that mattered to them. And so the work that I've been trying to focus on is constructing spaces for professional learning for teachers, where we model that, right? That everyone has a passion, everyone has an it of a question that's about, like, I don't know why this one person in the classroom doesn't raise their hand more, or I wish I knew a better way to help students collaborate together. Everyone has something that has been drawing at them. And how do we sort of bring that inner question into being in a public space where we can collaborate together on that, where teachers can see one another start to nerd out on these things, right? Because like I wear a great many nerdy hats, right? But how do we facilitate them seeing this and sharing in that capacity so that they can then replicate that? Because I think that something that we could do a lot better is something I talk about is we cannot do for others that which we will not do for ourselves, right? You might be able to do it for yourself, but you're just not taking the time, right? And so take the time to reflect, take the time to think about those questions, to think about the passion and who you are, and then maybe that's a better way to see that light come up in students around us.
So, again, an amazing testament to the work of how it is that we start to think about bringing innovations to our students, in the classroom, as LaRon talked about. And now you bringing it all together to say, how do we not only solve for the gap, but how is it that we really start to bring students into a platform and an environment that allows them to create and innovate and really move all of these spaces and converge them to new levels with the partnerships that that you guys are all starting to cultivate with private and bringing public together. And now Stacey sits on the side of private, and as she has a critical role within the global technology division at Warner Media, and really identifying what are the skills gaps that are needed for this 21st century next generation workforce. And then again, partnering, Jordan, with folks like you and LaRon to bring all of that intellectual energy in so that we're changing and transforming the approach that educators are taking to professional development for themselves, and then pouring that back into the classroom. And so what I'd love for Stacey to come and do is help us understand how we're relating what you're seeing, LaRon and Jordan, and how it is that that's playing a role in shaping strategy to help close the gap for this next generation of educators that are educating our next generation of students. Stacey, come right along and share with us that great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Therese. First, let me say I am so excited to be here. This is really an awesome panel. And I have to say, in all transparency, when I started at Turner Broadcasting about 20 years ago, my goal was to be the next Oprah. I figured I could get into Turner Broadcasting, make my way over to CNN, get on the news, and then, create my talk show career. When I came into the organization, I came into a technology environment and I just fell in love and I never left. It was amazing how that happened, but I worked in the TBS Broadcast Operations Center. And from there, I fulfilled several roles in technology to where I am today, which is working on understanding what our skills and our skills gaps are based on our tech strategy, and then partnering with different providers to help close those gaps. And I said that to say, right now, I feel like COVID has really kind of created this reset, if you will, where we're all now trying to figure out, how do we navigate this new environment where technology has become even more crucial. And so from my perspective, what I'm seeing is that not only were companies looking for talent that had the technical skills to push their business strategies forward, I think that's going to be even more the situation. COVID has just exacerbated that situation. And so from my perspective, not only are we looking to understand the makeup of the skills for our technology employees, but we're also looking to understand where do we go from here and pushing the envelope on emerging technologies. And so this has really been, for me, converging of passions, because my role And as a PhD student at Mercer University, I'm also working on the other end of the spectrum, understanding how I can contribute to the broader knowledge of society through what I have learned in technology over these past 20 years working for Turner and now Warner Media.
You know, this is a critical topic that even you, myself, Jordan, have talked about. When we think about connecting the dots from the work that you're doing to identify the skills gap. And then you have Jordan's and teams like Jordan that are really starting to evolve and transform professional development. We had a great conversation about how to build these connected experiences. And Jordan, we talked about the connected experience in education. Let's now bring that full circle, because I think this is such an important topic of how is it that we are taking the journey. And Stacey talked about that we now need to be focused on the end-to-end journey, not these siloed individual opportunities that we're deploying to market to be able to solve problems, right? In this space of closing the gap within the digital economy. But how is it that we really look at this end-to-end to say that from the time that a student's path is chosen to a time that educators are in their professional development path, to the time that companies and corporations are coming together to say, in the next 5 years, 2 million jobs will no longer exist. 4 million new jobs will be created next 5 years, and we don't have the skill set. So let's have that conversation about how we are breaking those silos to come together so that we can take the end-to-end journey mentality to go after this space in a way that's meaningful for everyone across the ecosystem. Jordan, why don't you start, and then we'll have Stacey jump right on in.
Thank you. Stacey, feel free to yell, holler. I'm the youngest of 4, so I'm used to having things thrown at me, but in this context, just throw and hands up. You know, I'm really interested in that because I think that, you know, I mean, for years we've heard about this skills gap, achievement gap, I mean, all of these things, but I think that the system is doing what it was designed to do, right? The system is not broken, the system is working. The system needs change, right? Like every system is designed to do exactly what the output is. And unfortunately, so the system is deeply inequitable. The system is deeply flawed. And so as we think about these things, they are not sort of, they're not onesie-twosie changes, right? That we can just sort of like tweak over here and move this a little bit and somehow we close that gap. The system is radically flawed. And so to that end, I think that we need to think about the fact that, you know, for educators of a certain ilk, that is a call for a certain form of revolution, right? That we have to demand better for a historically disenfranchised and a systematically disenfranchised group of learners. And I say that with some type of force because I don't think this is, I think the system, we've played the game of trying to adjust small things for too long, right? We've played that game and we're still here. So this is not a time to sort of say like, well, class of 4040 or 2040, we're going to get it right for them, right? Like class of 2021, it needs to be the first wave impacted by how we can change things.
I agree with that, Jordan.
You Stacey, you said, well, we're forced into that now.
Yeah.
You know, COVID, we didn't have a choice right now. We have no options.
We have,
right?
That's right.
Talk to us about that, because you're super passionate about this space that these siloed, one-off, ad hoc motions need to be there needs to be an underlying strategy to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely, Therese. And thank you for that. I want to give a shout out to Brian Cox right now because he gave me a phenomenal opportunity to join the Georgia Department Computer Science Advisory Council. And when we had a meeting a couple of months ago, there were probably about 38 of us on this conference call. And when I looked around, I was the only one from private. I was the only one from industry, and everybody else was educators. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, what's wrong with this picture? And so I said to Bryan confidently that we need to do something about this, and it starts here. And so for me, I'm very passionate about figuring out how do we collaborate more effectively between industry and education to really create seamless pathways into the work environment. So the work that I'm doing right now, while we're, looking at how do we figure out pathways, career pathways for our employees, that's no different from what education is doing on the other side. So it's like two sides of the same coin. Why can't we extend that so that as students go through these pathways through their educational journey, they walk into a career pathway that aligns with where we are in industry? For me, it seems like a no-brainer, and I know saying that it's simple, but I feel like we have the right people. This is the right time, and I think that we can do it if we really commit to doing it.
And so, LaRon, this goes back to the work that we've been partnering with at Microsoft, right? Where we bring in, actually, we did a big event about 6, 7, maybe it was sometime, it was 8 months ago. And it was all focused on bringing not only the educator side in, the students in, nonprofit, right? Because they play a huge role. And we brought in our machine learning data scientists. We brought in startup and LaRon side of small business. And so that whole collaborative motion of standing up in front of students, teaching them cutting edge capabilities. These students were learning how to build machine learning models. They were learning how to bring algorithms to life. They were understanding not only what they were doing, they were applying it to aerospace. So we were, had a simulation of an airplane, and we were simulating how do we get smart and try to infuse intelligence into regular normal processes. And so it was really taking, that whole component of how do we bring artificial intelligence to life, LaRon through the devices that you had a session yesterday. And so sorry I missed that. I know that it was phenomenal, but really thinking through that, again, it's not just about the technology. It's not just about changing and transformations in professional development. But then this piece that Stacey talks about, it is about the convergence of all of these components coming together, this entire ecosystem of teams that normally would never come together to deliver something new because this season requires something new. So talk to us about all of the great work that you're doing in that space to really further this whole partnership motion that Stacey's talking about now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think I'm glad to even see a lot of the comments coming through the chat and watching this conference, because I think that unfortunately, when you think about computer science and even the industry focus, unfortunately, most organizations focus on the post-secondary conversation, that kid that's coming out of college who has that CS degree, who's ready to go to work. And what we're finding in our work is that if you look at kids in the pipeline, and unfortunately, in most neighborhoods now, if you take a middle school kid and a high school kid, their level of output or exposure to computing is almost identical. And so there have to be programs that really focus back on the earlier part of the conversation. And one of the things that I noticed, particularly, again, I always go back to my experience at Tennessee State. Everybody who was on scholarship in our dean's program had to go and focus and support and tutor kids in schools. And we literally had a scholarship sheet. We had to get signage on how many hours we did per week. And when we went to those schools, we had a bunch of kids who had very busy schedules who wanted to go support. But we realized then the schools and the principals asked questions the wrong way. Every school needed volunteers. And they would ask a question like, can you come and help me 5 hours a day? Right? Which in my schedule ended up being 20 hours a week. But I realized they never asked the question the other way. How do I find 20 hours of help? Right? So by simply changing that question, I could go and find 5 friends who had 4 hours and still solve that gap. And so on my side of the equation now, that's what we're looking to do, is saying there are teachers in the classroom who are looking for real world examples. They need mentors, people. I know 30 or 40 friends right now who would all give an hour a week to come in and jump on a Zoom or come in and talk about experiences in the workplace. So I think rethinking how we connect this ecosystem, getting people to fit in and support time in ways that they actually have because it's localized. And then more importantly, within these classrooms, as we're solving these kind of technology or problems, we have to ensure that the things that we're solving are tied into the local economy or the local ecosystems. So you can't have a company who's a transportation company coming in and helping kids sponsor a robotics competition, as an example, right? So how do you leverage local ecosystems, problems they're solving, systems that they're working on? Some of these kids are working on these solutions, that the product manager or the lead VP can come in on career day and can see a group of kids speaking about things and subject matter that they actually care about in the real world. And then when those kids finish these projects, it leads into internships and co-ops moving forward. And so we're working on those type of scenarios to blend everybody together so they can fit in an authentic way. And I think when that happens, people can shine and feel like what they're doing makes sense, and everybody's really excited to pour into that. So that's some of the things that we're doing. And I think that more things like that need to happen, in my opinion.
You're talking my talk. You're talking my talk, my friend. Yes. When we can get to project-based outcomes driven, right? Where you're in class, you have a case study. I don't care, you could be 8 years old with a case study of an iPhone, and your iPhone gets manufactured somewhere. Your iPhone is smart. It knows where you're going through geolocation. Your iPhone talks to you through Cortana. That's your bot. And now we're talking about AI. You're on social media, Facebook. What's the thing? The TikTok that they're doing now, right?
Yeah.
There are algorithms running behind the scene. There's biometrics. There are all kinds of things. There's authentication. How is it that we have students that are advancing, but we haven't humanized the experience and made it real for them through real world use cases? I will tell you that is some of the components that are low-hanging fruit that today, no matter what that curriculum is, if you infuse real-world problem solving to say, hey, when you're on Amazon, it does personalization. You want to know how it knows when you're in the checkout, and it knows what your next item is. That's AI running. It's now about connecting the dots with human experiences. And this is the humanization moment, Jordan, that we've been waiting for from you, my friend. Talk to us about what we've been saying about humanizing technology and experience, and bring it all home for us, my friend.
It's a really fantastic synergy because where I work, a couple of my fantastic co-conspirators at work, lovely ladies, were running a artificial intelligence and ethics study group that brought together people from across disciplines and across sectors. And so we had some friends from nonprofit world. We had K-12 educators. We had university researchers. And I think the interesting thing about it was that it centered people in no one being an expert. It pushed people into an area where some people have designed systems for people, some people have designed systems for technology. But now the only thing that we all share in common is our humanity in that room. And so to your point, whenever we're teaching artificial intelligence, we want people to understand machine learning, right? We want students to be able to go through that process of having this deep knowledge in all these various areas. But we also want people as students to know that they're building these things for other people, and that artificial intelligence is learning from another human or a huge data set of other people. And so when we get into these conversations about machine learning, all this stuff, then we also have to think about the fact that what is data, and who is collecting that, and who owns that, because that data is not you, but it is kind of you, and it's a piece of you. And if Netflix knows that I'm sitting on the couch for too long, that's one thing. But if that data that Netflix knows I'm sitting on the couch for too long is then being sold to someone else, who then owns that data now? And so all of these sort of tricky questions that are sort of ethically based on being people, and sharing this experience as a community is really significant. Because we also know, with regard, coming back to that systems idea, that traditionally these surveillance systems and things like that have all been disproportionately affected minority populations, right? And so we have due diligence to say that if we're doing this, that we're doing it right, and for the right reasons. So I think that that's like a really critical piece that we want to run after alongside of the skills, but also, again, going back to that disposition about being a person first, and knowing that we work alongside of other people.
And if the educators are not educating students properly about ethics in AI, then who's building the algorithm? who's going to show up and change and transform the algorithms and the models that are being built.
That's right.
So that we get to more of equity that you've been talking about. So listen, we could probably do this all day long. I know we could. I know we gotta get to some questions. And so I'm gonna ask my final question to each of you, and I'm gonna start with you, Stacey. If there were two things, you know, listen, I'm not about going out and getting every, you know, boiling the ocean. It's got to start incremental, rapid, fail fast, move quickly, and then go to your next thing. So no long-term 2-year stuff. Now, if there were two things that you could recommend that we add to a, let's say, a backlog, what are the first two things that are top of mind from the skills gap perspective? There are two things that are go-dos for everyone on here to go make happen. What's top of mind? Those two things.
Yes, and thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you for that question. The two things that are top of mind for me, and you said something early on that really resonated with me. One is, I think we all need to adopt the mentality of lifelong learning, because this is really kind of where we are, and it's never going away. And so I think the sooner we can gravitate towards that mentality, the better off we'll be. The second thing is co-create. What I mean by that is, in 2015, I partnered with Georgia Tech's College of Computer Science to create a technology internship program. And one of the things that I made sure that was an ingredient in that program was the problem-based learning that you mentioned early on. What was phenomenal about that is these kids got to put their theoretical knowledge with real-world application. And it was amazing to see the problems that they were solving inside of a corporate environment, to the point that they really became in high demand for our technology leaders across the organization. And so I think that being able to co-create learning with students is really a powerful thing that we can do as leaders and as educators at this point. And I also think that it gives them the confidence to understand that we're sharing knowledge, because there's no one expert, especially in this, you know, new world that we're in now. So let's figure out, how do we co-create this knowledge path that we are all on together, so that we can really be even more impactful, because I think that that is the buy-in that we need holistically for everyone. So thank you for that question.
Oh, that's so spot on. And you can imagine that if we were all together building that lifelong learner journey, which I will tell you, someone's going to have to sit down and say that even past 18 to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, what does that look like? And then, are there new models that are created through virtual capabilities, to remote capabilities, to keep the knowledge sharing going, the co-creation going, that as you learn, you turn back and teach. As you learn, you turn. That's the journey, Stacey. Thank you. Thank you. I know someone's going to follow up with that, those two things that we can go do, and they're going to reach out to you. I just know all of you will. Thank you, Stacey. All right, Jordan, and then we'll wrap up with LaRon. Two things. And then I hope I have Bryan near us somewhere where, if we're moderating questions, if there are questions, feel free to ask this panel. And I think, Bryan, you'll be moderating that. But Jordan, two things, my friend, that are top of mind for you.
So I am, two things is hard because I'm super long-winded.
I know. Oh, I know. Oh, sorry. But you're going to be able to do this. I know you will. I have faith.
All right. So I think that coming back to what Stacey said, we had a conversation very briefly about this, but that co-creation I think is really significant. And that also means, I think another side of that, the same coin, is that we individuals need to become better with ambiguity, right? Like sometimes we run from that as like something that is like, it's uncomfortable. And so I can't deal with that. But I think that if we're going to be lifelong learners, if we're going to understand that we're part of a whole, we have to become individually more accustomed to sitting inside of that discomfort for ourselves. That's the only way the system is going to get better. Because in the exchange that Stacey and I had yesterday, we were talking about, like, you know, sometimes we talk about this, like, well, business thinks education needs to do this better, right? And education thinks business needs to do this better. Like, they work together, right? Like, we're all part of this system. And so we have to be able to share in that. And so I think that comfortability with ambiguity is huge and very personal. But I also, the second one for me, and I'll ground it, I come from an arts background, and there's a lovely quote that the universe is made of stories, not of atoms, right? And I love that this huge complex thing is made up of thousands of individual pieces, right? That we all think is and so I think that if we want to see systems change, we have to change. We are a part of that, right? And we can either be complicit in that system, or we can work to make that system better. And so I also that's the second big thing for me is how do we actualize it for ourselves on a daily basis? Because that's not isolated from something else. We are a part of that, and we can make ideally better, more ethical, and more proactive changes for ourselves and for the community.
I love that. LaRon will know I had to, when I first, about a year and a half ago, started buying gateways and devices and connecting the Bluetooth to the, and creating protocols like with Python and Visual Studio. I was just like, okay, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I'm breaking everything. So that uncomfortability of being okay, breaking everything. It's like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? It's gonna break. And I email, call, and I need instructions. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. And then ultimately, you end up doing it so much. You break so much that ultimately, you end up taking those learnings and then making it success. So being comfortable, being uncomfortable is the best guidance that anyone can have in this season. That all of this is new. We're all 5-year-olds again. Technology innovation means that we revert back to being a 3- and 4-year-old. You get the toy, you break it, you don't know it. It's okay. If things break, it's just okay. It is the world we're in. So thank you for that. LaRon, take us on with the 2 big things top of mind for you, my friend.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. I think it's 2 things that I think about, and I focus on it from the classroom and the school perspective. And I think I saw it running in the chat. I was reading through the comments while we were speaking, and that realizing that a lot of these things are new, and teachers have a lot of stress in just doing what they're currently doing in their day-to-day professions. And I think that having a venue, an opportunity for them to raise their hand, ask for help, because you will find that there's not a person out there who's an entrepreneur or a company or a technology enthusiast who doesn't want to get involved. And we have to find a way to engage the broader community to be in support of doing this. This is not something that can be solved by one individual. I think it's a fallacy to assume that we're going to go find enough CS professors and teachers to come and sit within every school that exists in the school district, because we can't find those people in industry in itself. And so we got to rethink how we're going to bridge these conversations to get that support. So that's one thing that I really think has to be thought through. The second thing is that, and oftentimes, and partially it's due to the state of what's available by way of things like hardware devices, but teaching software and coding and computer science can't be a completely virtual experience. Like when I came through the experience, we wrote code, and the examples were, make a program that prints to the screen prime numbers, right? Or write a for loop or a while loop, and those things kind of stop. We have kids at home today who are, playing video games. My 10-year-olds are downstairs right now because today is new season of Fortnite, and they're trying to go buy their battle passes and do stuff. And so they're using technology as consumers that's like infinitely above what's happening inside of the classroom. And then we show these menial examples that get them kind of not really focused on it. And so finding ways to make those experiences more robust, more rooted to things they see in the real world, and show them they could be a part of that has to happen. Otherwise, we have an entire generation of kids that we're exposing to technology or career paths, and the examples that we show are having them not pick those paths because they think that's the output. And so I challenge us all to figure out how to really make this experience a more robust experience so they can see how the things they're using or building or supporting can be built out. And the last point I'll say is that I often give the example of how we'll go into programs and help kids build examples. And the things that our kids today are trying to build in my world are things that I pay for, like via an API. So a kid is trying to build an entire business or entire opportunity, but because that's their level of exposure, But in the real world, I would literally go pay Amazon and Microsoft a penny a call to solve that entire problem. And our kids don't realize that those things exist. And so those are the type of things that I'm excited to kind of navigate through. And I think that once we start to cross those barriers, that we can really start to solve a lot of new class problems that keeps everybody excited and keeps everybody engaged.
I will tell you, I am so impressed. This has been so impressive, the three of you. And I know that after this session, there'll be probably a lot more conversation that we'll have together collectively in this moment, right? Of this historic moment for all of us as we're moving and leapfrogging to this next part of the digital era. And Bryan, if there are questions, we 100%, the panelists are ready to take those questions, my friend. Do you have anything for us?
We have a couple of minutes left, and there are a few questions in the chat. One earlier question was about, and this is something that I think I've spoken with Stacey about in the past, retirees. How can these retired professionals play a role in helping to galvanize this work and fill in some of these gaps in the pipeline?
Stacey?
Sure, I'd love to take that. So Bryan, I remember that conversation very clearly that we had, and I feel like the pipeline really is, or the pathway is seamless. And so right now we're doing the same things in two different areas, in education and in industry. But what would that look like if that pathway were seamless? And so I think with retirees, having that expertise and that knowledge, and being able to create that bridge, if you will, from education to academia, from education to industry is really where I think that we could create something really powerful, as well as utilize the knowledge and expertise of our retirees.
Great. I think they fit very well in that. LaRon, I love that idea you threw out as far as having a collective of industry reps or even retirees that can on call, jump on a Zoom call or drop in a school if it's just for an hour and give a powerful example of what's going on in industry. So I love that.
I'll take one point, but Linda asked a question about professionals, retired professionals versus teachers. And I was going to say, I went to an event with CTA in Atlanta Public Schools, and somebody made a great point and said, we focus a lot on student internships and not on teacher externships. And it got me thinking, imagine if I had access to a seasoned teacher for a summer to go and think about lessons and things that I can build around technology that they can actually then apply in the classroom in the fall. So I think we got to think about that as well. Like, how do you take a teacher, whether they be retired or practicing, and connect them with small business and industry so that we can both learn from each other? And then you're essentially creating champions back in the fall to push those things forward. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot as well.
I agree. Lynn had a question. What needs to happen to make building partnerships with tech entrepreneurs such that teacher expertise doesn't get dismissed? So how do we create that connection? Like, literally, what are the next steps to create that connection between the tech entrepreneurs and that teacher cadre that you're talking about, those externships? What's that next step so that the teacher idea doesn't get dismissed in the development of whatever curriculum, the product, or whatever?
Yeah, from my perspective, because I've spent a lot on this with this and my nonprofits, we got to find a better way to bridge that dialogue. Frankly, when it comes to education, most experiences are birthed through like formal processes like RFP and things like that. And I find it difficult when you're doing an innovative process. It's kind of hard to leverage that vehicle because by definition, through an RFP process, you predefine the output. So you're not going to get something new when somebody described all the metrics. And so we got to find a way via some grant process or through something that just happens to bridge these connections. And I don't think the current mediums really allow for that to happen, frankly.
That's the best point. That's spot on. You couldn't have said that any better. We got to reinvent the entire system and the way that we bring innovation into the education ecosystem. It has to change. And the grant process is a great way to start. But LaRon, you're spot on with that. We're seeing the same thing.
Let's see. I see a lot of comment about how they like those ideas and trying to figure out how they can get involved. I definitely think that Constellations and CS for Georgia are both organizations primed to take these examples or these ideas and move them forward. And you all, as members of those organizations or those collectives, are in a great place to champion and put those things in work. Let's see. Any other questions before we wrap up this session? Anything that I've missed? I see questions about how can we get involved right now this year? What can we do right now? What are the projects? What are the channels? You guys want to open yourselves up to connecting with?
Find me on, please do find me. I'm on social media, LinkedIn, everywhere. Please find me. We have a lot of tech, a lot of tools. Very excited about building a robust ecosystem of examples that are anchored in tech that can be leveraged in classrooms. So like I said, I'm born and bred in Atlanta. I'm right here. And I tell people all the time, I'm tired of getting on planes, going to neighboring states to solve problems. So it's time to work at home. So please reach out.
And Bryan, I think you have the infrastructure to start that dialogue as well with the CS Advisory Council. This could easily be another committee where we could start to pilot something. I would definitely be open to that.
I'm going to hold you to that, Stacey.
I know you are. I know you are.
Timothy Grant also put in the chat that Seismic has the GIFT program, which does teacher internship we're talking about. So that's one example, but we need even more than that. So that's great. Well, I thank you all for showing up and showing out. This has been fantastic. Your insights, your perspectives have been phenomenal. Thank you. I was going to say put your information in the chat, but you guys are already on. So, so anybody who wants to reach out to him?
Feel free, LaRon, to pop my, I don't think I have the other chat window open, but feel free to type, Treese Johnson LinkedIn. And I'll stay close to Stacey Jordan and LaRon. And from our perspective and our side, there's a lot we're already doing in this space. I think the key is how does it all trickle down and come together. So this has been amazing, Bryan. Thank you. And thank you to the panelists. So impressed by all of you and excited to see what comes next from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for the venue and opportunity to speak.
Not a problem.